Hi, my dear Astro family. Today, I would like to talk to you about the upcoming full moon in the sign of Sagittarius, which is going to be taking place on the 27th of November on 4 degree 51 minutes in the sign of Gemini and Sagittarius. Now, Black Friday is approaching, so I've decided to offer you up to 65% on all my existing and future courses and webinars. And then if you would like to book a personal reading with me, that's also discounted. So go and check out on my website these fantastic deals. Let's get going with this upcoming lunation. This is an exciting one. So as I mentioned, it is taking place on the 27th of November on 4 degree 51 minutes Sagittarius to Gemini. So moon is going to be in Gemini and the sun will be in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, a full moon always occurs when there is a opposition formed between them two. And the Gemini and Sagittarius polarity is basically our mental axis. So we've got Gemini, which is pretty much representing something to do with your logical self, the logical mind. It's basically your, let's call it as the lower mind, while Sagittarius represents your higher mind. So how does that play out in real life? With Gemini, we tend to be collecting the data. And then when it comes to Sagittarius, we are trying to make sense of that data. We are trying to connect the dots between two different information. So in Gemini, we tend to be thinking more in a logical way, while Sagittarius is telling you that, you know what, let's look at it from a broader perspective. Let's kind of like think about the future. So Gemini is very much about looking at the immediate environment, for example. So that's the sign of neighborhood. Let's look at what is happening around me. It's kind of like, there's the saying as well that just sweep around your own porch. That's exactly what Gemini does. However, Sagittarius says that we need to look beyond. What is the meaning of certain type of small things? What does it really mean in the real world? So somehow we are meant to be more adventurous with our mind. So because this is the mental polarity, it is telling you to have an idea and then expand on that idea. Surely this is going to be the topic because the dispositor of this full moon is Mercury, which is also very tightly conjuncting the sun. Actually, Mercury is in Cazimi, in the sign of Sagittarius. Cazimi is something which is pretty much you being whispered something into your ear. You get a piece of news about something. And it's basically an idea. It's kind of like a very fortunate position. Even though you might be wondering that, yes, Mercury is in a detrimental position in the sign of Sagittarius. But let's forget about these detriments and for a second. It's just really about cracking your brain. It might be causing a little bit of a difficulty when it comes to being able to make sense of a piece of information. But if you do so, basically, you can be very lucky with a Kazimi position. So when there is a full moon, as I said, it's always about opposition. Make sure that you never neglect both sides because it's somehow fatal. So obviously the sun and the moon are connected. One is talking about your needs, the other one is talking about your wants. So we're gonna have to bring them together. Moon is more to do with emotional security, while sun is more to do with your futuristic goal, who you want to become. So an opposition is a balance point. We're gonna have to find a balance between these two. So imagine that you get stuck, for example, just trying to fulfill your emotional needs, but you are not thinking about the future. So this full moon is giving you an opportunity to communicate with someone. It is giving openly, but it is asking you to collect all the necessary information that so that you can back up basically your speech in a way. Now, it's very possible that you have been thinking about something for a while now, and you realize that this is the time now to do something, to put this idea out there. Gemini is about writing, so imagine that you have been writing a book, for example, and Sagittarius is telling you that it's time to publish that book. So we might want to be doing the final editing, for example, so that it's ready to be sent to the publisher. It is also about, you find a piece of information and then you try to make sense of that. So it's a little bit like trying to figure out, thinking about the meaning to life. I mean, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, when it comes to Moon in Gemini, it's not necessarily the easiest position ever, because you are meant to be verbalizing your feelings, and that's not necessarily easy. So, but it's kind of like the danger of this Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius, that we can talk a lot, we can express ourselves, we can say a lot more. And Gemini Moon is bringing your attention to the fact that you're going to have to find the important part of these. So a couple of good things we can do with this. We need to have an open and honest communication or conversation with someone. You're going to have to somehow putting on the thinking hat and then eventually being able to express your own thoughts as well as your emotions, expressing your needs and wants as well at the same time. Obviously, as I said, the problem here is that Mercury is in a detrimental position. Often, the way we communicate with that is not so much with clarity. So basically, people might not be able to understand what exactly we want to. Oppositions are about relationships. So if you want to mend a relationship with someone, then actually it could be a great couple of weeks for you, or even a couple of months as well. But if you want to be learning a new language, for example, it's a great opportunity. If you want to be having any type of verbal exchange with someone about a very important topic for you, then it could be very good. Now, I would like also to point out, though, that Mercury is going to be going into a shadow period very soon. So there is an element of self-reflection which needs to be made here. It might be telling you to go on a self-discovery journey, who you are, what your needs, what your wants are. Obviously, Gemini Moon is more on the analytical side. And then Sagittarius more about gaining insight into your thoughts and belief systems and emotions. So this could also be a very good time to, for example, work on your own scripts. Definitely the mind needs to be more open and more optimistic as well at the same time. Maybe it could be a great opportunity for you to start your own journal, for example. Um, Now, obviously, you want to be looking at what house it falls into in your own chart. And by the way, there is another aspect here, which is quite prominent when it comes to this full moon. We've got a very exact quincunx to Pallas Athene. So Pallas Athene is going to ask you to examine your thought patterns, to examine your communication skills. She is the asteroid of pattern recognition. But also, Pallas Athene often plays the role of the mediator, who comes up with a strategy so that a communication can flow between two people better. So, for example, if you think that there is a conflict which needs to be resolved, then you might want to be having a third party involved. Why am I talking possible conflict situations? The reason why I'm talking about possible conflict situations is because the Sun very tightly conjuncting Mars and Ceres. Now, I have spoken about the Mars, Sun, and Ceres conjunction in my previous video. So if you are curious about that, you might want to be listening back to it. But obviously, what Mars wants is that Mars is kind of like the protector, the entrepreneur. Mars is the planet of entitlement. So this Mars is fighting for happiness. This Mars is traveling, for example, to find meaning to life. And then Ceres being part of it, which is very much about agriculture, but also something to do with trauma healing as well. So the full moon is exposing some of our trauma, which we need to believe that we are able to overcome if we want to. So that's why we're going to have a little bit of a conflict situation between the mind as well as the higher self. Imagine, imagine a situation that you are going to a therapist and you tell the therapist straight away that you do not wish to talk about certain type of topics because you know it's not an issue. Obviously, it's going to be a red flag to the therapist that it's a big issue in your life. So it tells you to have a very open mind to these wise people. Pallas Athene is also the asteroid of wisdom. So if someone is providing a feedback to you, then try to analyze and make sense of that feedback as well. But also, apart from the self-reflection and so forth, it could really talk to you about having a meaningful conversation with someone. Often, Gemini gets into some type of superficial chit-chats, and Mercury in Sagittarius now wants to have a very meaningful conversation with someone. So probably being on the same wavelength. But also it can tell you that you might want to try out new ways of communication as well. You might want to be experimenting. What if you use different words and so forth? Now, Pallas Athene reinforces that. Remember, it's a quincunx. Often with quincunxes, we're going to have to make certain type of adjustments. So it tells you to make an adjustment when it comes to your speech patterns. Maybe I'm going to speak slowly. I'm going to use less fancy words. I'm going to try to simplify my feelings so that others can understand that. But also, it is a great time to make certain amount of connections with others as well. Uh, um, kind of like trying to understand where they are coming from or making some meaningful conversations with them. Maybe you have only made small talk so far with these people, and now it's time actually to have a little bit more depth in that conversation. Remember that full moons are always about a culmination point. It's about fulfillment, pretty much achievement, something we have started around the new moon. So think back what was going on 2 weeks before in your life. And also, full moons are said to be highly emotional. For example, we tend to be a little bit more on the romantic side as well. So it's very easy to get swayed by our feelings. And as I said at the beginning, making sense of your feelings is not always an easy task. Now, what else do we see in this full moon chart? Because there are quite loads of things going on, actually. The other thing you can see is that because it's on 4 degree 51 minutes, so it's going to be falling onto Cancerian dwarfs. So when we try to pair Gemini and Cancer, it could talk to you about talking to a family member, for example. So many of us going to have a chat with our family members. But some of us are going to be talking about properties, for example, or it's again going back on a personal level. This would be telling us to talk about our emotional well-being. Now, the major aspect pattern of this full moon is a T-square. So unfortunately, this full moon is highlighting the Saturn and the Mars square. So Saturn is on still on 0 degree of Pisces. So this is the challenge here, because both malefics are present in this full moon. So while Mars wants to push forward, it makes a very quick decision to travel, for example, in the sign of Sagittarius, or to express its opinion as well, because Mars, Sun, Mercury together is a little bit like the cut tongue. So it's kind of like, you are not necessarily careful with your words. And the Saturn is trying to tell you, slow down, count to 10, breathe. Gemini, right? Breathe. Because you might be regretting something later on. Of course, Mars, as we said, the full moons are a release point, a culmination point. So Mars is trying to fire up the need to release something in our life. And then Saturn says, do not take the lid off too quickly, because something escapes and it might start hurting you. Saturn in Pisces, right? Pisces is about escapism. So I kind of feel like that there is a champagne bottle here, and then we shake it up, and then you are not waiting because you are so excited, and that's Mars in Sagittarius alongside with Mercury and Sun, and and uh, and basically you pop up the lid, right? And then the champagne is just gonna blow up in your own head. So there is an element of a pressure point coming with this Mars, and Saturn is trying to hold that down for you. Mars is kind of whispering something, whispering to do something. Mars is kind of like tricking you. Come on, let's do this. That's gonna be good for us. And then Saturn says, no, it's no time yet. We need to be a little bit more patient with it. However, I do like Saturn Mars together though, because that's the long distance runner as well. So when the two planets work together, it's basically very much about crystallization of our dreams, believing that we can do certain type of things. Saturn is the planet of endurance. So Saturn is prompting to Mars to finish something up. You've started it, you can do it, let's do it. And the result is going to be just fantastic of it. Saturn usually does these type of things when Saturn agrees with the action of the other planet. So in this matter, it's going to be Mars. So if Saturn agrees with Mars' actions, it can be very, very supporting. Saturn is in Pisces, right? So Saturn is trying to get you to find ways pretty much not to get lost, to remain on the right track, not to get distracted. And that's another challenge between Saturn and Mars, that Mars is distracting us a little bit because it's impulsive. It's in a fire sign. Adventure is coming, and I want to try that adventure out. And Saturn says, stay on track. Saturn is also telling Mars to mature up a little bit. It tells Mars, you are not a toddler anymore. And of course, Mars is really opinionated with Mercury and the Sun. So that little toddler is pretty much talking back to us. So it could, on a personal level, it could really talk to you about the fluctuation between your emotional needs and wants. And one moment you believe that you deserve to have every single adventurous moment in life, and the next moment you start thinking about your bills, and your responsibilities. But also, Mars is about sexual adventure. So Saturn says, hold on a little bit, Great that you have got all these sexual desires, but why don't you try to last longer, for example, or why don't you try to commit to it? Because there is a lot more meaning in relationships than just running around and then sleeping around with people. So Saturn is prompting to Mars to have more of a calculative move rather than making any type of impulsive decisions. So always remember about Saturn that it's about crystallization. And with Pisces, we visualize things. So you know what? We have got dreams. Now, Mars is giving us the belief that we can do it. So when Saturn and Mars work together, basically they are going to push you forward to get something done. But when you are lost, or when you are trying to pretty much make a silly decision, then Saturn will bring you obstacles. And this is exactly how in the next few weeks, with these planetary energies, that the universe does not back you up. Whatever you are trying to do in a way, and then it fails, and then you keep trying, and then you keep failing, then it's not meant to be, and you're going to have to move on. Or you're going to have to tackle the problem from a different angle. Of course, I was talking about the Mars Pallas Athene quincunx, right? Which is also about problem solving. Mars needs to learn to come up with a strategy. It cannot win the battle alone. So we're going to have to couple up with someone. And how interesting that the Gemini full moon is a double-bodied sign, right? A Gemini talks about two people overall. And of course, this combination includes Ceres as well, who is the asteroid of abundance, growth, trauma, weather conditions, agriculture, crops, and depression as well. Yeah, I mean, Mars and Ceres together could really talk about depression. So then in that case, if some of you are struggling with depressive thoughts, that this full moon is pretty much trying to encourage you to find ways to grow out of it. Also, I feel like with this new Sun and Mars and Ceres cycle, there is the message there as well that if you want to grow, you have to let go of something. And maybe with that Cancerian dwarf, we have to let go of some family matters. For example, maybe some of you will have to let go of their properties as well, such as trying to sell something, right? Gemini is about sales, trading, but also currency matters as well. And then obviously, if Saturn is squaring Mars, it's squaring Ceres as well. So you feel like that you are trying to grow, and the entire Sagittarius is about growth, right? And then you run into blocks. So let's find those blocks, where they are coming from. It really looks to me that Mars is trying to prick or to pry up the wounds within us, the insecurities. Now, there are a couple of other interesting things in this full moon chart, by the way, because we will be able to see that there is the T-square going on between Venus, Pluto, and the lunar nodes. Now, this T-square is pretty much starting just a few days before the full moon takes place, but it's lasting till about the 9th, 10th of December. Now, of course, Venus is not necessarily the dispositor of this combination, right? So However, we had a ongoing sextile going on between Venus and Mercury. So that's why I would say that this is something which is also pretty important here. This Pluto, Venus, and lunar nodes T-square. So two T-squares are happening in the chart. So let's break down that T-square as well a little bit. Obviously, Venus on one hand is the planet of relationship, and it is sitting on the South Node. So this is telling us that we have to examine our relationships more in depth. It is telling you to be, I mean, the Venus and the Mercury sextile is still going on, right? So it is telling us that it's time to have an honest, open conversation with our partner. Maybe whether you trust your partner, maybe you feel that they are toxic towards you, maybe that the partner is trying to belittle you in any ways, but the relationship somehow needs to be in the focal point. And Venus and the South Node could indicate to you that, you know what, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to stop people pleasing. And you're gonna have to be able to focus on your own personal development as well. Now, on one hand, this personal development is coming from North Node in the sign of Aries, which is about entitlement, which is about the growth of the self to feel more comfortable in your own skin. Of course, Venus rules money and creativity as well. So you know what? If you want to do something artistic, then with that Venus and Mercury sextile, this could be a great way to express some of your thoughts, for example. Uh, with the South Node, imagine that you had some creative outlet before already. You just haven't done it for a while. Now, Pallas Athene being part of that um, um, quincunx to Mars and Sun could pretty much talk to us about some artistic matter, which we are meant to be coming up with. Also, Pallas Athene is a creative solution to problems. So I feel like you are invited to do something creative, and Venus and Mercury is brilliant to do something nice with your hands. So I'll give you an example. Imagine that you feel pressurized, Pluto, that you have to buy gifts, Venus, to your relatives, Mercury. And you have to have this tough conversation that you do not have enough money, right? Again, that would be the Venus-Pluto kind of square. And you decide that you're going to have this conversation with them and you want to be making handmade presents. Handmade, Mercury, presents, Venus. And it has got a lot bigger value, Venus. Of course, Venus represents money. So this is telling you that you are stretched somehow financially, but also it is talking to you about a financial opportunity to make an investment, to take a risk with your money and put it into something. But often what happens is that Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn, so we are afraid that we are not going to be able to be due diligent somehow. Of course, the lunar nodes are all about your faith, something you are meant to be learning. It's your purpose this time around. And yeah, Saturn in the sign of Libra, that if you feel that the relationship is not supporting you anymore, then unfortunately you're going to have to walk out of it. And I know it sounds bad. Now, Venus has not finished yet because Venus is also having a finger of God configuration as well. And this is exactly happening during the full moon period. So we've got the Venus, Uranus, Neptune finger of God collaboration. Now, a finger of God, or we can also call them Yod, is when two planets are in quincunx to a third. So in this case, Neptune, Uranus are in a quincunx to Venus. So obviously, quincunxes are always about frustration. So often with Neptune and Venus, we do not feel creative enough. So I'm giving you a piece of advice to make your Christmas presents, right? Handmade Christmas presents. But then Neptune and Venus says, I don't feel creative enough, or I don't know what type of present to buy this time around. And Uranus is telling you, come on, use your intuition. You know, you are very talented. Also, Uranus is the unique expression of the self as well. So it tells you just put yourself into that piece of present, and everyone is going to fall in love with it. Uranus says, make an original present, something authentic. And then it's just going to be doing really, really well. Now, going back to this full moon, even though this is relating to the full moon, but I also would like to mention, though, that we've got the Sun and Mars conjunction, and obviously opposing the moon. Now, Mars is involved with some minor aspects. Mars has got a sesqui square to Chiron while it's squaring Saturn. So I've spoken about the Mars square Saturn element. The Chiron element is very much about, you know what, you need someone who is going to give you wisdom. You need to heal the self. And Mars is the dispositor of your North Node. So Mars in Sagittarius tells you that you need to believe that you can heal, that you can get better, that you are a winner, that you can win. You need to imagine that everything is possible if you put your mind to it. And definitely on the other side of the coin, with Mars and square Saturn, also Saturn calls you to act upon your dreams as well. Just work hard towards them. So guys, this is the upcoming lunation. I mean, in the world, you know, I can imagine with that Venus and Mercury, for example, some peace talking, but also Venus and Mercury is definitely about offering discounts as well, just like I do every Christmas and every, you know, birthday, especially I like that one quite a lot. So, but definitely some peace talk, for example, or the social media can blow up with some false information, especially with that Venus and Neptune quincunx, with Uranus being part of it as well. So guys, thank you very much for watching me, and I will see you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.